Hello, welcome back to Star Citizen, where in this episode we're going to be discussing the largest and most expensive ship so far of this entire series, the 600i, which is now beautifully parked in front of Thurston here right now, while I'll talk a little bit about it. In this video we're first gonna discuss its capabilities in terms of what you can expect if you play with one of these. Then later we're also going to be having a tour to maybe talk about some of the very baffling design decisions that CIG made with the interior of the ship. And then we might even have a shootout against really big targets to see if it can still hold out to those. But we might be seeing that later, or maybe it's just a Cutlass Black. You can always hardly tell with these bounty missions if you get a Cutlass Black or just a Hammerhead or something. So let's first start with just the general equipment that the ship has. I'll often draw comparisons with this ship and the Constellation series, mainly because I own the Constellation series. I've been using it a lot. I'm very familiar with it and its limitations. So I'll use that for comparison, and kind of role-wise they're kind of similar because they're kind of medium-ish ships that benefit from being multi-crewed but are still working fine enough if you just pilot them on your own, like I'm doing right now. Although yesterday I did have some buddies on here and we had lots of fun piloting it together too. So having more people is always great, but you can use sort of most of the functionality of the ship on your own, which kind of excludes ships like the Carrack, because those have no pilot-controlled weapons, or let's say the Caterpillar, because while you can still trade with it, you can't use its full combat capabilities if you're just on your own, because the pilot just has pretty pitiful weapons. Anyway, let's first start with armament. Basically the guns that the ship has equipped is a set of 3 fixed size 5 guns. One is technically counted as a nose gun, and it's the one on the back here in the front. Which, well, if that's the nose of the ship, I'm not entirely certain, but, you know,
there's that. Handler, just waiting for final clearance, and then we can get started.
The other guns are located under the wings here, on the side here, on the wing, and on the other side over there. What you kind of notice from the exterior loadout of the ship, let me actually get this to come to a full stop because this turning around bothers me a little bit. What the hell?
Weapons active. Weapons deactivated.
Why are you drifting for no reason? Hello? Not an interior thought. Hold on a second. Now you stop moving. Crazy. What you probably noticed from the exterior view is that the weapons kind of stick out like a sore thumb from the entire, you know, design of the ship. Which the ship was basically the blueprint for the new Origin design philosophy, which is long, swept, and uninterrupted lines, which you can see here in the ship because it's just long lines everywhere, which looks good and all that, but the weapons kind of seem like they're glued on. Like, oh no, now we also have to add weapons, so let's add one of the top there in that mount, okay, and then here that one is also a little bit exposed, which could have done better. You know, they could have been more receded in the geometry of the ship. Maybe here, just on the wings, you could just make this metal outer protection piece a little bit longer, and then the gun would just neatly kind of disappear into the ship geometry while still maintaining its usefulness. So that's kind of a little bit of a weird optical choice. No matter, let's get into our patrol point while we continue talking. But comparing this loadout with the Constellation, you'll notice that you're basically lacking one gun that the Constellation had, and you know, the ship is much more expensive and larger than a Constellation, so it's a little bit of a weird choice initially to say, you know, it just got fewer weapons now for whatever reason. So there's that. Also, the default loadout is especially pathetic because it starts out with 3 fixed laser cannons, which are not very good. Also, fixed weapons are broken, and hitting something with fixed weapons in a ship this size, yeah, probably not with fightercraft. If it's at least a cutlass in size and you're patient, you'll probably be able to do it, but fightercraft, nah, don't want to do that. And you're probably looking to change those weapons to something with gimbal mounts. So basically, I just took away some of the guns from my Constellation to just install the laser repeaters here that we know from there. And 2 size 4 gimbal weapons work fine against fightercraft. There's really not more you don't really need more armament just against fightercraft. Your main difficulty is just hitting them in the first place, but if you hit them, you're probably gonna vaporize them with a few hits. So you don't really need more than that. I've saved the 3rd mount for something special that we'll talk about later, maybe. But this armament is just fine against fightercraft. Then other comparisons are also not very in favor of the ship, in particular the cargo capacity, because this ship has a whopping 40 SCU of cargo capacity, which is even less than the Cutlass we talked about last time, which is a much smaller, much cheaper, and to some extent a way less complicated ship. So there's really not much reason for the ship to just say, just have cargo capacity of 40, which seems more like an afterthought and not like, you know, having dedicated trading gameplay associated with the ship. So while you could say that the ship was designed for other things than trading, you really can't do much trading with just 40 SCU, especially if you're in a big ship like this where you might have difficulties landing in some places. So trading is basically out of the picture unless you're really strapped for other options. But then there's also some upsides compared to the Constellation, one of which is the maneuverability of the ship, though I should be a little bit more exact and say just the way that it turns is a lot better. It's way less prone to overshooting like the Constellation is, which because of the way the virtual joystick works, you sometimes overshoot the target you want to turn to and then have to correct after the fact. This ship has way less of a problem with that, probably also because I'm used to having it even worse on the Constellation. I'm noticing here that even without correcting afterwards, I generally get the ship pointed to where I want it to. It's also a bit faster than a Constellation by having a higher top speed. However, the acceleration and the deceleration of the ship is a little bit worse than a Constellation, which in turn makes it a little bit more drifty if you kind of decide to change course while the ship is still moving in one direction, because the thrusters are probably more powerful than the ones on the Constellation, but they have way more ship to move around. So they'll probably be hard pressed to just make a random turn in this direction. We'll have a lot of drift before we eventually just turn into the direction that we wanted to turn to. So you should probably be slowing down first, then turn, and then start to move into the direction you wanted to move, especially if you have asteroids around you and stuff. But as you can see, especially if the fightercraft aren't evading, you can still put them out of their misery pretty quickly, because, you know, as I said, 2 size 4 guns is plenty of firepower to deal with fightercraft, honestly. So there's that. So you're probably wondering, so is there an upside to the ship compared with the Andromeda, or is it just worse because it's Origin, and Origin is, you know, luxury, and luxury is kind of has this weird interpretation in CIG's mind that it needs to be way more expensive for looking fancy, but it probably has less functionality than less fancy ships. There actually is an upside, and the upside is that the ship uses mostly size 3 components, except for the quantum drive. The quantum drive is still a size 2 quantum drive, but at least, unlike the Constellation, you can also change the quantum drive for another quantum drive, and you're not fixed with a pretty bad one for its size. So that's also just slightly better, but there is some talk about increasing the size of the quantum drive to size 3 too. Right now, size 3 quantum drives are in kind of a weird spot though, where they're not that much faster, but they have a way longer spool up time than size 2 quantum drives, so depending on what kind of jumps you plan to take, it might actually take you longer to just move around in small planetary systems with it. For long distances, it's probably worth it, but for small distances, it's really not, which puts it in a pretty decent spot right now, I think, with size 2 but modifiable quantum drives. But the rest of the components are size 3s, which means size 3 coolers, which are way more efficient than size 2s, even though the Constellation has 2 coolers, but still, coolers are like better by like a factor of almost 20, which is ridiculous. Also, the shield, we already talked about size 3 shields and how ridiculously powerful they are in past videos. And you can see it here too. Even though... Uh-oh, server's just crashing. No, I'm getting a call. Not sure why I would get a call. What the hell? So it looked like the server was crashing. Because there's no hostiles here. Sorry, hold on a second. Something seems a bit off. May have to interrupt that recording and pick it up later. Let's continue with the shield really quickly before I forget about it. There seems to be nothing going on here. Oh. Basically, the increase in shield size, even though you only have one shield generator, means that you have a bit more shield power than compared with 2 medium shields, and by a factor of like 7 increased shield regeneration, which is a pretty huge benefit. Apparently I'm gonna stop this recording right here because something's happening with the server. Don't know what, but it doesn't generate enemies, and there was this weird incoming call, which probably shouldn't have been there. So I'll see you guys at a later point. So we're back. Server's still there. Apparently just the mission bugged out, or maybe the mission giver wanted to contact me for something, but it didn't update anything. Maybe I should have just accepted a call. I just found it weird to get a random call in the middle of nowhere while I was recording. So apologies for that. We're not going to see the end of that mission, but we're going to continue to our next mission target, which is going to be a bounty. While we do that, let me continue the discussion of the usability of the ship. Basically, just having this improved shield generator makes a whole lot of difference, because you can do things that are just way too risky with the Andromeda, like getting up close and personal with the bigger ships, because you're not too worried about that instantly vaporizing your shield and just knocking you out entirely. So it has a little bit more of a defensive approach than the Andromeda has. The Andromeda has lots of guns, but really not much maneuverability in shields, so in all fights you try and be very aggressive and dictate conditions to the opponent, because you can't rely on your ship to hold up for too long if something bad happens. This, however, with a large shield, does not quite have the same issues. Another thing that's better than with the Constellation that I didn't talk about is the turrets. If you go back to the exterior view, we can actually not see, right behind that window here, there's a place where a turret can move out from the ship structure. The area of fire, the arc of fire that turret has is actually pretty decent. It can't shoot straight ahead, so if there's a target that's right in front of you as the pilot, the turret will not be able to fire on it, but if it's slightly left, right, or above it, it still can. And then there's another turret which is located here on the bottom in the middle of this black darkness that we don't see illuminated right now because of the light issues, but there's also a turret on the bottom that can extend from there, and it has also a pretty decent fire arc to the front. So if you have people there, they can support you. Even more interestingly, these turrets are controlled by the people sitting in these front seats here, which is also nice that as a pilot you can also see if your gunners are there, so you know, okay, there's someone sitting in there, so I can expect them to man the turrets now that we engage this enemy here, which I think is pretty nice. They don't obstruct your view too much, but you can always tell if someone's sitting there, which you can't in the Andromeda, because all the seats are basically right next to one another, so you would have to look around and see, oh, there's someone sitting there, and oh no, that guy's taking a break. And the turret gunners are sitting even behind you, so there's even less chance you can see what they are doing and if anything's going on there. So that's pretty nice too. Another thing, it also has pretty powerful missile launchers. It starts with a 543 launcher, which, if you're not familiar with the terminology, means it's a size 5 missile slot. that has 4 size 3 missiles. You could also exchange it for a 5.42, which is one that has a 5.24, which is, or a 5.2. No, I think it's a 5.24 then. 5.24 has 2 size 4 missiles instead, or a 5.15, which would have 1 size 5 missile, and size 5 missiles are torpedoes. So this gives the ship an interesting role that you can fit it to, which is, hunt down big ships. Because of its large shield, it doesn't have to fear much from other big ships initially. And the loadout also works really well for that with the stock loadout that you're given, because your fixed guns work well against big ships. Also, the turrets that your gunners have initially are outfitted with 2 size 3 distortion repeaters, which makes it kind of a weird choice when you think of your turrets as trying to provide anti-fighter cover for your ship, but makes a whole lot more sense if you think of the turrets as providing you some additional firepower when you try to engage big targets. And then you could also potentially add torpedoes to it, so if you want to take someone out in a big ship, that's probably not an 890 jump, because that's probably way too big. But if it's just someone in an undermanned hammerhead or something like that, or a caterpillar, then the ship does actually surprisingly a pretty good job. So there's that. Where was I? Missiles, right. So the missiles are also a slight advantage compared to the Andromeda, which just has a lot of very small missiles, but since you can only fire so many of them at the same time, they're really not much help against bigger targets, because they just ignore the pitiful damage that comes through those small missiles. But even the size 3 missiles that this ship comes with in stock are pretty dangerous to medium and large ships, and fighter craft hit by it will probably have a really bad time being hit by one of those missiles. So that is also pretty good. Alright, we're almost there, so it's probably gonna be cutting it a little bit short if we go to make a tour around the ship too, but let's get started anyway. Alright, what we're standing here is the bridge. The ship has 2 elevators. One is directly behind the bridge. That's probably the one that you're going to be using to enter and maneuver the crew around. Going to be taking a look at the lower decks later. And also there's some emergency evacuation pods here. Then this variant here is the Explorer variant of the 300i, not the Touring. It's also the Touring variant, which basically, instead of having this room, has some separate bedrooms for guests that they can sleep in. This room, if you ask for my humble opinion, is just a horrible waste, because it has this display here, which right now doesn't do anything. Maybe at some point you can use that and the scanning stations behind it to coordinate some stuff, or to just scan for things and then sell them on the market, but that's not in the game yet. So right now this room is just a whole big room of nothing, basically. One thing that I particularly don't like about the style is, do you see these swept lines here again? This room doesn't have any really clear defined edges, which, you may like. I personally don't like it that much, but, well, it's something that if you like, you like it. If you don't, then you'll probably not want to spend so much money on that ship. Anyway, if you move further back is actually where the area where the... I guess in this version it's kind of your recreation area for your crew. Also some cargo, I think, here. Or is it just tech stuff? Door? I think it's also tech stuff. You can at some point maybe open those panels and then your engineer can repair some stuff here. And then in the back here you have this recreation area that we already saw from the exterior view that has these huge, nice glass planes, so you can take a look outside. And then it has, tables and the bar up there. If you go down here, there's another bar, small kitchen arrangement, and there's a pool table and all that kind of stuff, which in this variant is probably be just used for recreation of your crew when they have downtime, which is pretty nice. You can stay out and still enjoy some luxury of civilization, and not just eat basically your food right out of the can while just sitting at a small table. What is a little bit off-putting about it, though, is that on the side here, it has these rooms here, which are used for cargo and again for some of the components being stored here, so that your engineer can access it, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because most of your crew in combat situations probably be located at the front, so they would have to run all the way down here and then go here to repair stuff. But the room is also located in the same place in the touring variant, which makes even less sense because you probably have your guests here chilling out, and then if something happens to the ship, it's under attack or something needs to be repaired, the engineer needs to run all the way through here, through the guest area, in order to access components to repair them. And also just your guests are sitting right next to it, so unless you have some sort of lock in place there, they can also just do stuff to it, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, to be honest. If we go down to the lower level, we can see here in this variant what is probably going to be the main quarters of the crew. Again, on first glance, pretty beautiful room, though it's a bit whole emptiness of almost nothing. You know, it would make much more sense if there was at least some small walls around these beds so that the crew can have some privacy. In the way this is here now, it's neither very comfortable and it's just, again, a huge waste of space, you know? So, I don't really know what they thought of that. Then there's, again, escape capsules here. Escape pods. And then at least you have a decent shower arrangement and stuff. Which is good and all. But it's located very far away from where you might be working, so in case of emergencies they also have to walk quite a distance to get to their stations, possibly. And also there's only elevators that they can use to get around the ship, which in emergencies the elevators may be down and then you might have a crew stranded there somewhere and really no option to just reach their stations in the first place. What's actually a pretty nice room, I think, is this captain's quarters here, which also has a nice transparent view outside and a nice, much more inviting layout than the rest of the ship has, which has kind of a very cold, clinical feel about it, like this whole bunch of white and a little bit of black here. But the captain's quarters are actually pretty decent, I think. But again, you technically have no privacy here. If you brought someone along with you, they'll have a nice view and all, but it would be a little bit better if you could just also make this less transparent, you know? Because having a nice view of the stars is romantic and all that, but if everyone can see you from outside, maybe a little bit less. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a quick tour around the ship. As you can see, stuff is arranged in a very weird fashion, and a lot of things seem like a terrible waste of space or just being added as a pure afterthought. And it's even worse for the supposed personnel carrier variant of the ship, the touring version, which, as I mentioned, in some places has even more of these issues. What the? Okay, let's just get out of here. I mean, I appreciate none of these gens try to shoot, but what the frick is happening? Why is the quantum drive not working? Let's move a slight bit, sorry. Technical difficulties. You could also just technically fly there, but we could have a much smaller distance to cover if we could just... Must be in a really weird spot for the system to just register all these points, but what are these points? Nothing that we can go to, apparently. Huh. Yeah. Sorry about that. It's gonna be a little bit of a longer video, I guess. or you can just skip through this part, because I've run out of most of the interesting stuff that I wanted to tell about. All in all, I gotta say, it's been an interesting ride. I mean, I expected much worse from the ship when I was renting it for 280k Alpha UEC, which is quite a bit, you know? But apparently I have enough money to just rent it for a day for just trying it out. There's some things that positively surprised me, but then there's also a lot of things that left me scratching my head and what the hell was the point of all this? So yeah, it's in a bit of a weird spot, especially since it is so much more expensive than pretty much all its competitors. So I don't know. If you own the ship, you're probably just doing it because you like the Origin design, and you know, it's fair enough, but still I think they've refined that style even a little bit more with the new rework of the 300 series, and especially the 890 Jump, which is a lot sleeker looking and has less of this clinical feel that this ship has. So they're probably gonna rework this at some point in the future too. Maybe they'll also reconsider some of the baffling design decisions, like having the cargo bay and the engineering stuff way in the back, isolated in an area that, if you have guests, they'll probably be located there, which if they brought some personal cargo for you to transport, you know, I don't know what, some of their clothing, whatever, then you would basically need to hand load it from the main cargo elevator in the middle of the ship that we walked past earlier when we went from the crew quarters to the captain's quarters, and then you need to basically bring that cargo all the way into the back of the ship through the recreational area. It's totally messed up, if you ask me. So there's that. But other than that, its combat performance has actually been pretty interesting, I gotta say. Maybe I can now also reveal what I put into the center mount of the ship, which is an energy distortion scatter gun. I think I already talked about those in some of my fightercraft videos before, but I didn't use them much. They're basically short-range shotgun-like types of weapons that fire a lot of pellets at the same time, and then spread out, and then probably not all of those will hit a target, which makes them kind of useless against fightercraft unless it's sitting just basically right on top of you. But where they are useful are at engaging larger ships, because you'll be hitting them with more than one pellet, and if you're getting really close, which due to the improved shields of the ship you can afford to do, unlike if you were sitting in the Constellation, because they're getting close will probably end in your death and not their death. So but in this vessel you can afford getting real close due to your shields, and then just unload on them with the distortion scatter gun, which takes care of the main hindrance that prevents you from destroying the enemy ship, which is, you know, their large shield generator. So that has been an interesting weapon to try out, and it works pretty well. We'll see if this 10k bounty gets us a big target or not. We'll see that in a few moments, if you bear with me. Also, there's an 8k available, but I'm probably not going to do that in the recording, but you know, I like money, so I can try out more of these expensive ships, because the price is ridiculous, you know? 285k to rent the ship for 24 hours is pretty crazy, but we had a lot of time yesterday. As I said, just have two gunners with you. I changed the gun loadout for them too, so that they can destroy fightercraft too, just with regular guns instead of the distortion repeaters, and you can have so much fun with this. Anyway. It's a fun ship to fly. I'm not entirely sure what the function is, because it's kind of has the same jack of all trades, master of none issue that the Cutlass has, but it's way, 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 way more expensive than the Cutlass. So it's a bit weird. I mean, it has some really nice things, like it also has pretty good fuel scoops, so you probably never need to worry about refilling your hydrogen, because by just floating out here in a while, they're probably gonna replenish. As you can see, it's at 99%, and I don't think I've ever replenished the hydrogen on this vessel. So that's pretty nice. Also has a pretty large tank for those for those times when you do need to just maneuver a lot. So it has a lot of comfort features, but the functionality is like, you know, sitting at about a similar level as the Cutlass, with this notable exception of it being able to engage large targets pretty well if you get a decent setup for it. But is that really a role, the dedicated medium to large ship hunting device? I don't know, to be honest. It's a little bit of a weird role for a ship that's supposed to be an explorer. Maybe once we get more explorer parts and into the game and new mechanics, maybe it'll become better in that regard. But right now, it's just very overpriced. Probably the main reason for why it is so overpriced is that it also comes with a small ground vehicle that is parked on your elevator. Since I just rented the ship, I didn't get it, but
Contact.
That's just an Andromeda, sadly. Well,
Contact.
maybe it's got some decent escorts, but let's take care of the Andromeda first.
Weapons active. Contact.
As you can see, even the Andromeda has a hard time keeping it up just against 2 size 4 guns that consistently hit it. So even against targets that size, you don't really need any support, but you know, this distortion gun can also do some stuff. Maybe at some point distortion guns will also just completely immobilize the ship again, which we had for only a very short amount of time, I think. At least we had it with EMP, that it also could immobilize ships. If we get the same mechanic for distortion guns, that if you continue to do damage through the shield of an enemy vessel, you just disable the ship's systems, then the initial loadout of the ship also makes a lot more sense, because then your gunners can basically immobilize the ship for you, and then you can just see, okay, now that's not moving anymore, let me just finish it off with my big fixed size 5 guns. So then the initial arrangement of weapons also makes a lot more sense, that basically your gunners immobilize the target first, and then you just swoop in and destroy it. And as you can see, it's the ship, even though I'm not running at any reasonable amount of speed, it just drifts. But drifting is fine until we run into an asteroid. Anyway, but I've also tested it against bigger vessels, and with gunners and the normal loadout, it can deal with big vessels, but you'd probably need to all hit it consistently. With this modified loadout, I've also been able to take out caterpillars. I think I should also be able to take out the AI hammerheads, but I haven't run into one of those yet. So it's doing a fine job at that, but it's a very, very specialized role for the amount of money that you're investing in. Not sure if that's worth it to you, but let me know your thoughts on this ship, and I hope I see you in another video next time. Have a good one.